Melissa Wolfenberger was born on September 9th, 1977, in the small town of Locust Grove, Georgia. The youngest in her family, she was doted on from the start. Her older sister, 7 years her senior, helped their mother care for her, and over the years, the two grew incredibly close. In high school, Melissa met a boy named Christopher. They stayed together after graduation and eventually got married. The couple settled in a quiet suburb outside Atlanta, where Christopher found work at a glass manufacturing plant. Not long after the move, Melissa became pregnant. First came a daughter, then a son. By 1998, 21-year-old Melissa was a full-time mom, staying home with the kids. She was young, but content with her growing family. She still tried to visit her parents and sister as often as she could, but the distance and the demands of two small children made it difficult. That year, they planned to spend Christmas together. On Thanksgiving, Melissa called her mom to ask for something special, an old photo of her grandfather. Her mother found the perfect one, pulled it from the family albums, and waited excitedly for Melissa and the kids to arrive. But Christmas came and went, and Melissa never showed up. At first, her parents were surprised. They had planned the visit for weeks. Still, they figured she might just be overwhelmed. She was caring for two toddlers and had recently started a job at a local cafe to help make ends meet. Christopher's income wasn't enough to cover everything. Reaching her wasn't easy. Melissa didn't have a home phone, and cell phones were still uncommon. She usually called from her in-laws' house, but since Thanksgiving, she hadn't been in touch at all. Her parents waited, but when Melissa didn't call on her mother's birthday, the worry set in. They decided to drive to Atlanta and check on her. What they found left them stunned. Melissa and Christopher's house was completely empty. Neighbors told them the family had moved out right after Christmas, but no one knew where they had gone. The sudden move made no sense. Melissa would never just disappear without a word. Eventually, her parents reached out to Christopher's family. Through them, they finally got in contact with Christopher. But instead of answers, they were met with even more questions. Christopher claimed that Melissa had left him back in December, and that he hadn't seen her since. According to him, she had decided to move to California and start a new life, leaving both him and their two young children behind. Melissa's parents didn't buy it. They couldn't imagine her walking away from her 1- and 2-year-old children. And if she had truly moved away, surely she would have called, written, or visited. But she never did. Despite their doubts, Christopher stuck to his story. Melissa's parents pressed for answers but got nowhere. They returned home, frustrated and unsure of what to do, except that they weren't giving up. Over the following months, they tried everything they could to find Melissa. They contacted friends, extended family, and anyone who might have seen or heard from her. But there was nothing. It was as if she had vanished. Then, in the spring of 1999, Melissa's mother saw a chilling news report. Atlanta police had discovered a human head in a bag soaked in bleach in a wooded area. A few days later, more bags were found, 4 in total, each containing human remains. What caught her attention was the location. The discovery site was near Christopher's old workplace. She feared the worst, that the remains might be Melissa's, but police later confirmed that the head belonged to a missing man from a separate cold case. By early 2000, with still no sign of their daughter, Melissa's parents decided it was time to get the police involved. But even then, progress stalled. Detectives interviewed Christopher and concluded that Melissa had probably left her family voluntarily. Since there was no evidence of foul play, they decided not to pursue the case further. Melissa's parents disagreed. They didn't believe she had just walked away. In fact, as time passed, they became more certain that something terrible had happened, and that Christopher was involved. They knew the couple had been having serious problems. Melissa had told them about the abuse. Christopher had hit her on several occasions, and she had left him before, taking the kids and staying with her parents. But each time he apologized, promised to change, and convinced her to come back. That history made his story even more suspicious. If he had always tried to win her back, why hadn't he done anything this time? He hadn't called her parents, hadn't gone to the police, and made no attempt to track her down. There was something else that didn't add up. According to Christopher, Melissa hadn't taken a single thing with her. No clothes, no jewelry, not even her ID. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and helps us grow. A huge thank you to everyone who's been watching. It didn't make sense. But without support from the police, Melissa's parents were left to search for answers on their own. For years, there was still no trace of Melissa. Then, in 2003, everything changed in the most unexpected way. Police were reinvestigating the cold case murder of a woman killed in 1977. The case had gone unsolved for 26 years, but new DNA testing helped detectives identify the killer. It was Carl Patton, Melissa's father, and that was only the beginning. After his arrest, Carl offered police a deal. He agreed to confess to 3 additional murders in exchange for full immunity for his wife, who had helped him cover up the crimes. Melissa's mother eventually agreed to testify against her husband and was granted immunity as part of the arrangement. According to their confessions, the killings began in December 1977. A woman named Mary, who was close to Carl, offered him $115,000 to kill her husband. Her motive? He was cheating on her, and she had taken out a life insurance policy on him. Carl accepted. He enlisted a friend to help carry out the murder. But when they went after the man, his lover was with him. So they killed her too. They dumped the woman's body in a river and placed the man's body in his car on train tracks, trying to make it look like an accident. A month later, Carl told his wife that his accomplice had started talking, sharing details of the murder with his girlfriend. Carl said they needed to be dealt with as well. He invited the couple to his home, killed them both, and, with his wife's help, disposed of the bodies in a river. She also helped clean up the crime scene and the van used to move the bodies. Later, Carl confessed to a 5th murder, committed 5 years earlier. Once again, Mary had offered him money. This time, it was to kill her first husband. Carl agreed. With 5 murders now tied to him, detectives naturally began to wonder, could he have also killed Melissa? But Carl was adamant. He said he would never harm his daughter and had nothing to do with her disappearance. Investigators looked into it, and surprisingly, they began to believe him. At first, they had only suspected Carl of 1 killing, yet he willingly confessed to 4 more. He said he was consumed by guilt, and that remorse had driven him to come clean. Then Carl made a surprising request. He asked to speak to the lead detective who had cracked the case. When they met, Carl told him, "You managed to catch me, so maybe you can find my daughter." The detective was intrigued. Here was a man who had admitted to 5 murders, now pleading for help to solve his daughter's disappearance. The detective agreed. He began reviewing the limited information in Melissa's case. One thing stood out right away: those bags of human remains found near Christopher's workplace 4 years earlier. At the time, police had assumed the remains belonged to a man. But the detective learned that assumption had never been confirmed. No forensic testing had been done. It was simply a guess, based on how decomposed the remains were. He ordered a DNA test. Since Carl's DNA was already on file, they had a direct comparison. The results confirmed what Melissa's parents had feared all along. The remains belonged to Melissa. Following the breakthrough, police confirmed what Melissa's family had feared for years. She wasn't missing. She had been dead for some time. Her case was officially reclassified as a homicide. According to the medical examiner, Melissa's body had been dismembered using a reciprocating electric saw. Strangely, her torso was never found. Investigators searched the wooded area where her remains were discovered, but the torso never turned up. Still, they uncovered a promising lead. They began looking more closely at Christopher. When they interviewed his former employer at the glass factory, they learned he had been fired around the time Melissa vanished, allegedly for stealing an electric saw, the same kind used to dismember her body. Melissa's mother also told detectives about the abuse her daughter had endured. Christopher had a history of violence. He also had a criminal record. Then came another red flag. Not long after Melissa's death, Christopher changed his name, for no apparent reason. All signs pointed to him, but police still lacked hard evidence. They brought him in for questioning multiple times. He stuck to his original story, but changed details with each retelling. At one point, he said Melissa had run off with a lover. Later, he claimed she wanted to disappear to sell fake IDs. Another disturbing fact surfaced. After moving out, Christopher left his children with his parents and largely disappeared from their lives. He visited occasionally, but the kids didn't even recognize him as their father. Despite all this, nothing pointed definitively to murder. Detectives needed physical evidence. They obtained a warrant to search the house where Melissa had lived. Given the nature of the crime, they believed the murder likely happened there. They hoped to find traces of blood or anything that tied Christopher to the scene. Forensic experts combed through the home, collecting samples from floors and surfaces. But the technology at the time wasn't advanced enough. No useful evidence was found. The materials were stored in an evidence warehouse, in case future technology could one day reveal more. Detectives kept pushing. They tried to get Christopher to talk. They chased down every lead they could find. Nothing stuck. Once again, the case went cold, and stayed that way for years. Meanwhile, Melissa's father, Carl Patton, was convicted and sentenced to 5 life terms, plus 20 years for the 5 murders he confessed to. Mary, the woman who paid him for 2 of those killings, had died in the late 80s. She was never charged. Melissa's mother and sister never gave up. They kept the case in the media, stayed in contact with detectives, and continued pushing for answers. But progress never came. The case remained cold until 2017. Melissa's mother never gave up hope. That year, she attended an event where true crime enthusiasts gathered to discuss cold cases and share leads. Among the attendees was crime analyst Cheryl McCollum. Melissa's mother approached her and shared her daughter's story. Then she added something that stopped Cheryl in her tracks. "My husband committed 5 murders, and I helped him." That single sentence pulled Cheryl into the case. After the event, she began digging deeper. She interviewed Melissa's family, reviewed the case, and even kept in touch with Melissa's father, who was serving a life sentence. What struck Cheryl most was how a man who had killed 5 people seemed more concerned that his daughter's murder might never be solved. Over the next few years, Cheryl gathered everything she could find. The deeper she went, the more one name kept rising to the top: Melissa's husband, Christopher. There was no direct evidence tying him to the crime, but the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. He had a known history of domestic abuse. He never tried to find Melissa after she disappeared. He moved on with his life as if nothing had happened. He was fired for allegedly stealing an electric saw, the same kind used to dismember Melissa's body. He changed his name shortly after her death, and he abandoned their children. To Melissa's family, there was no doubt, and that included her children, who were now grown and actively helping Cheryl in her search for answers. Cheryl also consulted with well-known figures in the true crime community, including journalist Nancy Grace and several law enforcement professionals. After reviewing the case, they all reached the same conclusion. Christopher was the most likely suspect. But without a single piece of undeniable evidence, the case remained stuck. Nancy Grace encouraged Cheryl to start a podcast to bring renewed attention to the case. Publicity, she said, could be a game changer, especially if it reached someone who didn't realize the importance of what they knew. Cheryl took the advice. In 2023, she launched her podcast, releasing the first episode focused on Melissa's story. She followed up with multiple episodes, featuring Melissa's mother, sister, and other relatives. Cheryl laid out the timeline, the facts, and the evidence, but for a while, nothing happened. Then, in April 2024, something finally broke. After releasing a new episode, Cheryl was contacted by a man who had stumbled across the podcast. He believed he had information that could help. He told Cheryl that shortly before Melissa's disappearance, he had witnessed a serious argument between Melissa and Christopher. The details of what he saw were not made public. Detectives chose to keep that information confidential for the sake of the investigation. But sources indicated that Christopher had allegedly threatened Melissa during the altercation. Cheryl passed the tip to the police. It became the turning point. Detectives reopened the case. Over the next 3 months, they re-examined evidence, re-interviewed witnesses, and used updated forensic technology to analyze everything, especially the bags containing Melissa's remains and materials from the house she shared with Christopher. Then, in August 2024, investigators held a press conference. 25 years after Melissa's murder, her husband had finally been arrested. As with the witness testimony, police have not released specific details about the evidence uncovered during the renewed investigation. Some sources suggest that advanced forensic tools may have revealed DNA or other key evidence directly linking Christopher to the crime. The decision to withhold details is standard procedure. The less information available before trial, the harder it is for the defense to prepare counter-arguments or undermine the evidence. For now, Christopher remains in jail, awaiting trial. A preliminary hearing, where he'll enter a plea, has yet to take place. Melissa's family has little doubt that justice will be served. Investigators seem just as confident. All signs point to substantial evidence, strong enough to be difficult, if not impossible, to dispute. After nearly 26 years, the case is finally approaching its conclusion. Melissa's story has captured national attention, and for good reason. Her death was only confirmed after her father, convicted of 5 unrelated murders, asked police to look into her disappearance. A podcast later brought the case back to life, attracting the key witness who ultimately led to its reopening. And now her husband, long suspected, has finally been arrested. Melissa's children believe their father is guilty. They hope justice is close, and with it, the truth. But for now, they wait. A confession may be the only way they'll ever truly understand why it happened. Share your thoughts on this story in the comment section. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.